Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Cy Adler, Interim Dean of the College of Urban and Public Affairs. And it's my pleasure to welcome those of you in the room, as well as those zooming in, to another in our series of panels inspired by the 50th anniversary of the Portland Downtown Plan, within which Portland State was designated an urban university, a university that is in and of its place. So I'm going to introduce the panel moderator, Jennifer Dill. She'll introduce her panel members. A bit of housekeeping when we get to questions and answers. For panel members, would you please repeat the question so that those zooming in will be able to hear it? So the previous panels we've had have been about the university and what it's been like for PSU to be an urban university. This one's a little bit different because this one is about downtown Portland. Because we at Portland State, we're downtown, there isn't anything that is of greater concern to both the university and the city than transportation into and through downtown Portland. So this is a really important one for us. Just a word, we're here in our remodeled Dirce Moroni Toulan library. Work in progress, still need to get stuff up on the wall and into the bookcases. But it's a great space and we hope to be utilizing it for students to work on projects as well as for events like this. Want to say thank you as we begin to the Dean's Office staff, Kaya Mendoza, Erin Sutherland, Sarah Violante, and Jonathan Wolf, who make these panels possible. Sarah Violante has been the one to take leadership about the library transformation. So a special thank you to her. It's my pleasure now to introduce Professor Jennifer Dill, faculty member in the Toulan School of Urban Studies and Planning and director of our Transportation Research and Education Center, TREC, one of a few federally funded transportation centers around the country. It's a pleasure to have Jennifer. Second time, first as moderator, previously a panel member. So Jennifer, please introduce your colleagues and take it on.
All right, thank you, Cy. I first want to also thank Hal Hagedorn, Associate Director at TREC, who helped me plan this panel and who's watching us virtually. I'm going to start at this end of the table and introduce Gabe Graff. He is the Central City Capital Program Manager for the Portland Bureau of Transportation. He has worked on improving active transportation and transportation safety in Portland for over 15 years. He joined PBOT in 2008 and managed the Bureau's safety programs, including Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School. Since 2016, Gabe has managed PBOT's Central City Transformation Team, leading the development and implementation of the Central City in Motion plan. Gabe holds a BA in politics from Oberlin College. Politics, a very useful degree for transportation planners. Serious. Next up here, we have Kathy Tuttle, who is a board member of Bike Loud PDX. She holds a PhD in urban design and planning, and she worked for almost a decade for the city of Seattle before becoming a planning consultant. As an activist also, she founded the nonprofit Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, and has been an activist on issues of climate change and transportation for over 3 decades. She moved to Portland last year and has been very engaged in a number of projects, including developing a downtown Portland car master plan. She presented that work at a TREC Friday seminar earlier this year that you can view online if you'd like to learn more. Next to me, we have Mark Raggett, who is the urban design and planning leader for GBD Architects in downtown Portland. Prior to his work at GBD, Mark led the urban design studio at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for the city of Portland from 2009 to 2019. He also serves as the director of planning and design for Friends of Green Loop, a nonprofit organization committed to building the Green Loop in Portland's Central City. And here we have Andre Lightsey Walker is the policy transformation manager at the Street Trust, a nonprofit focusing on ensuring a safe, affordable, and accessible regional transportation system. Andre is a fourth generation Portlander. He attended Grant High School, the University of Oregon, where he studied philosophy and public policy, another good combination, and most recently PSU, where he received his master's in urban and regional planning. So I'm going to start our session today with just a few slides of the 1972 downtown plan. Since not everyone is familiar with it, and we're going to be talking about space, so I think we need just a handful of pictures to set that context, and then I'm going to open it up to the panel, and we're going to take us from 1972 all the way up to now and looking into the future. There we go. First, just a couple photos from the 1970s of downtown Portland. And, you know, if you don't know this history and haven't seen some of this, quite a bit different landscape. And on the right, you can see just huge number of surface parking lots and areas devoted to the car. And then the other on the photo on the left is Harbor Drive right along the river. Which is another key part, or the removal of it was a key part of the 1972 plan. So just a little bit of quick context, the contrast to what we see today. So just a few elements of the plan. First of all, the general, within the transportation circulation parts of the plan, the general goal was reducing reliance on the automobile, and particularly increasing the amount of pedestrian circulation, and also to develop a mass transit system. So this diagram is showing the preliminary traffic circulation and parking. There were plans for major transit mall along 5th and 6th streets, but also along Adler and Morrison, and talk of one along 12th Avenue as well. There are plans to give maximum accommodation to walking in the core. Also to encourage the use of bicycles by developing a network of bikeways serving the entire core and connecting it with adjacent areas. With respect to vehicle circulation, you can see here, it looks like there's some streets missing. And there were definitely plans to reduce the amount of motor vehicle traffic and close some streets to motor vehicle traffic, or to limit it to transit vehicles only. The removal of Harbor Drive along the waterfront was part of that plan. And in addition, you can see there's some dotted lines here on what was called Front Street at the time, now Nadeau Parkway, with plans for perhaps closing some of those parts of the streets as well. Parking was a big part of this, the idea of consolidating parking into parking garages to funnel the traffic, and then people would drive or people would walk instead. And I clipped out one part of text here, which says that parking is phased out between 4th and 10th Avenues and between Taylor and Stark Streets as short-term off-street facilities become available to reduce traffic. So big transformation intended. Another part of it was the idea of traffic-free areas. And you can see in this diagram, the intent was a large parts of the downtown area would be largely traffic-free. And one of the statements in the plan was automobile traffic is noisy, smelly, and dangerous. And that was part of the motivation to emphasizing car-free areas. And you look at that map it is a significant part of downtown, and juxtaposed next to that circulation plan, you can see in a few of the cases, it's not completely shut off to traffic. There might be through traffic in one direction, but not the other, and in other areas. And you can see some of the Portland State area was envisioned as car-free area. And then finally, the pedestrian circulation and bikeway plan. And you can, there are major corridors for pedestrian circulation in all directions. And the other thing that was part of the plan is skyways connecting buildings, and it started down here at the PSU campus, and a few of those skyways are still used by us here. But there were plans for a skyway, you can see in the east-west direction, and in a few other areas connecting tall buildings and to increase pedestrian access. So that's just a little bit of background to say some of the transportation visions back from 1972. And those of you who have spent time in Portland now, you can sort of see how some of that has come to life and some of it perhaps has not. And so I want to kick off our panel discussion with asking so what's happened since 1972? What elements of the plan do you see are still intact or have inspired what we see today? And also we can talk a little bit about what has changed. I'm going to start with Mark. I forgot to tell you who was going to go first. So we had a great conversation planning for this, so I know there's a lot of opinions.
So what has stayed the same and what has changed is the question, and what?
Yeah, so bring us up.
Okay.
Brief summary of the last 50 years.
Summary of a lot of years. I think, like we talked about in our opening in that call where we were getting ready for this panel discussion, the downtown plan was a I think, like Jennifer and Sai just referenced, sort of turned Portland around. I would say relatively earlier than other American cities. So the plan was adopted in 72, but that means it got started in the late 60s. So that's pretty early for American city to recognize that, the downtown was sort of hollowing out. There was no investment. People were, not wanting to go there. A big impetus for the downtown plan was it was focused on, or Portland at the time that led to the downtown plan was a lot of DEQ, my recollection is air quality days. There was a series of days that were too much smog. I think there was a lot of environmental concern with sort of the lack of planning, the lack of thinking of any alternative besides driving. So big moves were the transit mall, the cross-access retail core in Tomahawk from Park. The transit mall was a huge piece of this plan and success of that plan. It's still there today and got expanded with subsequent plans. The next big plan was the 1988 Central City Plan, which recognized that downtown is not just Burnside to 405 to the river to PSU, but it's actually South Waterfront and Central East Side and Lloyd and Lower Albina and the Pearl District, frankly, and Goose Hollow. So downtown is a much bigger place, and that we need to figure out how to get people to want to live in downtown. So we started fixing the infrastructure, and now we need to and actually you can see the success of the Central City Plan and previous ones just out the window here. So all of a sudden, and the timing was good, and I don't want to get in there's a lot of details there, but all of a sudden there's a market to live in downtown. Kind of people wanted to be in downtown all the time, live there. They were also, in terms of transportation, introduced the idea of maybe it's not just the transit mall, there's streetcar loops. This bike walking thing is a real thing. Let's start thinking about that more strategically. It crosses across the river. Let's have walking ways, let's have bikeways. How much time, Jennifer? I could yak on here and yak on.
Well, since you paused, I'll put a pause there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the transit mall. And if I remember correctly, you were involved in the transformation of the transit mall when you worked for the city of Portland, correct? And Gabe, I don't know if you were involved in that as well.
Before my time.
But one of the things it did is it introduced cars back to the mall.
It did. That was the thing. Yeah.
And
the original transit mall, I don't know, for those who remember, you could not drive a car all the way through on 5th and 6th Avenue in either direction. That was part of how it got its funding. It had to be a transit project by not allowing through automobile functions. So if you recall, there were a couple pinches, and I don't remember exactly where there were 2 spots on 5th and 6th Avenue where the sidewalk got really wide and you had double rows of trees and it was sort of very lush and pedestrians could move through and the transit vehicles, but not cars. That was a big, and then you fast forward to that project, which was transit mall revitalization, I think. Big deal, added light rail. So again, still building the downtown plan, this core idea of a north-south transit spine. We're going to add light rail to it. And we're going to look at it kind of carefully and see what's working and what's not. And one of the things that was flagged about not working in the transit mall was that lack of motor vehicular circulation on 5th and 6th Avenues. And that was flagged as something to help bring a little more life if possible. And again, there was a lot of debate and argument back and forth about how much of a thing that really was a challenge. But those two pinch points were removed with the light rail project. So the cars could now drive up and down 5th and 6th Avenues unobstructed. And again, I'm gonna stop talking. Other people have to talk. Transit mall is supposed to work with Broadway and 4th, where for cars, transit was supposed to be 5th and 6th. Somebody else should say.
So the thing that stayed the same is it's always been a car town. I mean, it's always been a car downtown. I think that that's the throughput from 1972 until 2022. And I think this is something that the city is working on now, is trying to make it less of a car only town. I think that's the biggest change I'm seeing.
So Gabe, you're working on the Central City in Motion plan. So what are some of the key elements from there that will be transforming in the future?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of thread, I can't say that I've spent a lot of time reading the 72 downtown plan before we started working on Central City Motion, but we did, Mark and I and a big team worked a lot on the Central City 2035 effort, which was the most recent update. And yeah, there are a lot of threads that connect back, some of the projects that we've completed recently, like the work on NATO Parkway, adding the cycle track and sidewalk along the waterfront. Carving out a little bit more space for people walking and biking and better crossings to get to the water and to access the river. I saw resonating in the plan. Just nice to see Alder on the list of the transit. We just got the line 15 back on Alder. Yeah, we're in terms of trying to bring more people and make it sort of less car focused downtown. Completing the work of making it getting in and out of the downtown and around the central city by bicycle safe and comfortable for more Portlanders. We just completed the work on Broadway to take the protected cycle track design that we piloted it in the PSU campus, over 10 years ago. Now it extends all the way to the Broadway bridge, which is great. And then coming soon, we'll break ground on Southwest 4th Avenue, which will be its northbound sister with a protected bike lane from just south of 405 all the way up to Burnside. So yeah, we've got a lot of exciting projects that we've been able to implement in the last few years based on the Central City Motion Plan, and more coming. But yeah, there are a lot of threads that connect back to that.
The thing that the downtown plan, the 1972 plan has, is it's saying don't have people who are driving go through the town, take them around the town. And that's something that the city still really hasn't done. I mean, people still pass through, they go along a Burnside Bridge or a Morrison Bridge, and they're going through town. They're not being diverted around the town. And I think that that's something that really needs to change if we're really thinking in the future about a car light city, a place where just people who live here, tourists, can park their cars, people who live here can park their cars, but then you get out and you walk around. And that hasn't happened yet.
More to do.
More to
More
do.
to
Andre, your perspective both from the Street Trust and a longtime Portland resident.
Yeah, I think the tone of Portland as this really forward-thinking planning city sort of emerges in that document. And I think the vision of bicycles as a form that can really be transformative for us is really exciting to know that people were thinking about it back then. One thing that I do have concerns about, and maybe that has changed, is the way we're thinking about community engagement in contemporary settings. I don't know what the community engagement process was in 72, but I don't imagine it was really engaging the communities that it needed to be. And we might have seen a very different plan if they were, talking to other community members. So that's something I'm excited about. That's sort of at the forefront of planning in contemporary settings. But I think there's still a lot of work to do.
So that gets at one of my next questions was sort of what did the plan miss? And what was missing from it? And so you just mentioned wondering about the community engagement part of it. Are there other things that you look at the plan and think that it's missing or not addressing?
I
And
mean,
obviously there's new plans since.
totally,
so,
totally.
yeah.
I think it's sort of left out sort of the future of modes. And I think they weren't thinking about e-scooters and e-bikes in 72. And so that's something that's emerged since this plan. And I think that's something that not a lot of plans need to be considering moving forward about how people are actually moving transforms.
Other things, Kathy, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Thoughts about everything. So, women were, an element that probably wasn't really front and center in the plan. I
Or
would
the
guess-
people behind the plan. I looked at the list.
Yep, I looked at the list too. And I say that because it's not just, we need cities that kind of meet the needs of caregivers and women and safe cities and, places where people feel like they can raise a family, but women, and now, sort of everybody with the pandemic has taken on a different kind of role of how we approach. We don't have this kind of 9 to 5 need for, the commute into the downtown and the commute from the downtown, the traditional guy in the car coming into the downtown. We don't have that work trip. We have people doing trip chaining. We have people doing, just sort of ordinary getting around that could be by a variety of different modes that really people weren't thinking about in 72. It was predominantly, let's get, the businesses operating with the guys in the cars coming into town and then leaving. And that's not what we're doing now. It's a completely different transportation landscape.
So Gabe, do you want to pick up on that on some of the things that you're currently looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the Central City Motion Plan we adopted in 2018, our Portland City Council. So, and a couple of years working on that prior, but a lot has changed since then. And, I think we're talking in our call about sort of the 72 plan, 88, Central City 2035, how the more recent plan, 2035, seemed like a big focus of it was like, okay, some of these strategies have really brought back jobs and brought residents to the downtown, to the central city. And now we really need to manage for growth. Like there's and particularly with the Central City Motion Plan, as a big challenge of how do we, so if the central city is going to continue to grow in terms of population, and continue to attract the jobs that we're expecting, the current way that people are traveling around is just not feasible. It just doesn't physically work. So how do we make our streets more efficient? How do we get our new commuters and new residents to embrace transit and cycling and walking to work, so that our transportation system doesn't break down? But the pandemic, I think, has really changed, how people think about work and life, and certainly transportation choices. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting questions that we don't really have the answers to yet. But we might have a little bit more runway before our transportation system totally breaks down.
Okay, so
Yeah.
On a high note there.
and well, here's another question for you. So what do you think the relevance of downtown is to the region? And should, where should we, it raises questions of where should we be investing in infrastructure? So the importance of the downtown versus the rest of the region and connections. And I know the Street Trust has thought about this a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off with this question, I like to reflect on sort of what downtown has meant to me as a person that grew up here. And it was really a place I didn't go to often. It was really centered around very, very specific events or activities. Japanese Garden, Oregon Zoo, if that, crossing the river, right? I think really, as I imagine Portland downtown in this sort of post-COVID era, I think it is a place for gathering, and a place where you can be where it's denser than some residential areas. And so what does that density bring to you? Like diversity in people and communities, and seeing things that you maybe don't see in your neighborhood, or accessing foods that you don't have in your neighborhood, right? And so I really think downtown is a place to connect people to experiences. Yeah.
And what about in terms of transportation, the transportation infrastructure?
Oh,
and those
yeah.
decisions of how we invest?
Totally. I mean, I think it's a core. I think, especially if we are going to imagine our downtown as a place of employment, we want to make sure that everyone in the region can easily get there from every single direction, and make sure that they have modal options to do it quickly as well and safely.
Mark, thoughts on the relevance of downtown to the region as a whole?
I think with the most recent plan, the Central City 2035 plan, I think an idea, Gabe may already mentioned this, was the downtown should feel part of everyone's neighborhood. So I think to Andre's point, that we shouldn't have people in the city or the region thinking that downtown is not a place for them. That place is not comfortable to me for whatever reason. Downtown should feel like it is a part of everyone's community, everyone's neighborhood. It has stuff that are not going to appear anywhere else in the city or region. So the things that Andre just rattled off are not going to appear anywhere else. So those are things that should feel a part of everyone's neighborhood, and everyone should feel comfortable getting there. I think Gabe and I were a part of, maybe Kathy and Andre. I know Andre was a BPS, trying to figure out how can we rethink our transportation system to build those connections that Andre was talking about. An advantage that the Central City has is 40% of the land area is in streets. That means Gabe's bureau controls almost half of the land in the Central City today. So that seems like a huge opportunity. And to Gabe's point, there's could be a long runway and everything, wings can fall out the airplane. But I think that's something we could think about building on the transit mall from 1972. Maybe we can optimize some corridors for some modes of travel, right? We have the advantages. We don't have a bunch of wide streets in the Central City. We can grab extra space. We just have lots of them. So let's grab some and think about prioritizing those for certain modes. Cars need to be a part of that equation. So we can't just, vote cars off the island, but we can have some streets that are a little more about cars, some streets that are a little more about transit, and maybe some streets that are a little more about pedestrian bikes. Understanding that all streets, all connections have to have a certain baseline of safety and a certain baseline of comfort and that kind of stuff. But I think we have an advantage in the Central City, in the new downtown, not just the small area too, with just the network that's there and the opportunity that network presents.
How is the Green Loop idea? And maybe for folks who aren't familiar with it, very briefly, what the concept of the Green Loop is.
Well, it kind of just spins from what I just said. It's sort of it's an optimization of it's a 6 mile linear park concept that kind of runs around the Central City that sort of is embedded in some of Gabe's projects over there. And it's basically saying we have this opportunity in this space. The park blocks are sort of exist on the west side. The west side is frankly pretty well served by parks and open space. So we're talking about transportation, but to make a great place, transportation is a part of it and the other things. What about the east side of the river? And the Green Loop was an idea through processes like this. I think Jason may have been in some of those meetings where we're trying to figure out how to create that opportunity, that open space, and that comfort of mobility for everyone in the city and region. And the Green Loop is a linear park concept that would sort of add green space to the east side and connect known projects and crossings, kind of like a connect the dots exercise where we're sort of maximizing investments that are already sort of planned or being discussed. So it's a linear park concept that builds on it.
It certainly facilitates active transportation.
Absolutely, and wants to be sort of that place that feels different, that it's transformative, that is approachable, accessible, and comfortable to the broadest range of user groups.
Mark mentioned 40% of all land use in the downtown is park space. That's our public space, or not park space, it's street space.
Okay.
And it should be park space, but we have, that 40% is mostly dedicated to people in cars right now. And the other 40% though, is the fact that 40% of the people in downtown do not drive. 40%. That includes people with disabilities who do not drive. That includes people who are too old or too young to drive, children and very, very old people. And that also includes people who are too poor. Owning a car now costs over $10,000. Owning and maintaining a car costs $10,000+ a year. And so we are giving away 40% of our public space and taking out of the equation 40% of the people who do not drive. And that's something that really needs to change, because particularly in the downtown, you ask, what does the downtown serve? The downtown serves especially people who are very poor. A lot of the social services are not going to go out to the suburbs. Those kinds of services are for very good reasons, concentrated downtown. People need to be able to access them. We need to be able to have housing, dense housing that serves people who are very poor, and transportation that allows them to access the services that they can't get otherwise. So that's another reason that our transportation system really needs to be solid for people who cannot afford to drive.
I think that's one of the, when I started working in the central city, that was one of the most interesting things for me to learn, is just how much there's a sort of perception of the central city and the downtown as being a rich neighborhood, and it's not only does it serve the very poor with a dense concentration of social services, probably the densest in the state, but it's also got sort of the pipeline of affordable housing is in our central city. Most of the affordable housing in our city is in the central city. I think nearly a quarter of people, these are like pre-pandemic stats, so things have changed, I imagine, but nearly a quarter of folks are living below the poverty line. So it's we have a lot of in transportation particularly, we have a lot of infrastructure gaps to address in East Portland and Cully and all across the city. But we also really need to get the central city right.
I led a bike tour of social services downtown, and one of the places we stopped was Stone Soup. They do training for new people who want to work in the kitchen and restaurant around industry. And of the 63 people that had gone through the program, only 2 of them had cars. The other 61 did not have cars, because working in the restaurant industry is minimum wage. You cannot afford a car, but still you have to get around to places. So we need really good transportation systems and the ability to walk and bike places too.
So I want to go back a little bit to the traffic-free areas. And I know this is a topic that you've been working on and thinking about now, Kathy. So do you want to talk a little bit about sort of those efforts and how you see we might go forward on some of these ideas?
Well, actually, one of the people who's in the project that I'm working on, a Better Block project this year, is Cameron Bennett back there. But there's 3 other students who are working on that. And what I did is I came with that map that you showed, the car-free map area, and I said, let's see how we can update that for a car-free area, a car-free plan for downtown. Well, luckily the kids in the program were not as crazy ambitious as me, and they're like focusing a little bit by doing a pilot project of, and they're talking to all the relevant neighborhoods and community associations, but car-free Keller. So between the Keller Auditorium and the Keller Fountain, connecting that to the Halpern block sequence of also car-free space. And then, maybe if they can do this pop-up, perhaps all of next summer, yay, maybe, we'll see. Then actually sort of extend that. My thought is to maybe do a car-free day or 2 downtown, like a Sunday Parkway kind of thing too, to start getting that conversation going again about but that would be the Better Block project that this student group is working on. And I wanted to say their names because they're good people working on it. Owen Christopherson, Aiden Simpson and Emily Dan Terrio. Thank you. Cameron Bennett is back there, but it's the 4 students, and they're really working hard on making this a great kind of car-free demonstration project.
And just maybe to give a little, you mentioned Better Block. And for folks who don't know, that is a program now sort of coordinated through TREC that through 3 different sets of core classes, both in engineering and urban studies and planning, community-based projects are worked through from an early conception stage to perhaps some implementation. And we TREC solicits organizations and agencies to submit project ideas. They get selected in the first class, and then right now it's a studio in the urban studies and planning. But that one of the very first projects that ever came out of that sequence was Better NATO. So that was a pop-up temporary bike lane walkway area that was designed by some students at PSU that helped evaluate it. And now, as was mentioned.
Yeah, be careful what you work on, because we might build it.
Might build it. And so it's an amazing, I think, connecting sort of how PSU fits into downtown, both literally downtown, but also the engagement that we have with students. So Kathy's brought that idea to the Better Block cohort and being worked on. So glad to see that happening.
And we brought in the Green Loop folks too. I mean, Keith is coming to work with the students as well. So.
Mhm.
I think NATO is such a great example of that. Urban university working with the city and like bringing, and it was such a hard fought project that we really needed that. We needed that volunteer demonstration to show that that change was possible and needed. I don't think the project would have happened, certainly wouldn't have happened otherwise. But it does make me think about that time, how much Portland has changed in this pandemic era, and just how, so the thing that I think gives me optimism for the central city and the downtown is just that I think the appetite for change and the like our speed and people's openness to change has really broadened. You know, we're talking about the benefit of transportation is politics sometimes, but I think people's openness to seeing that 39% of the central city's landmass that public right of way in new ways has really broadened. So I think hopefully we'll be able to move a little bit faster than been able to in the past.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the protected bike lane on Broadway that started through Portland State. That was also temporary. And Portland State, we helped do the evaluation of that before sort of it got blessed to be more permanent. But that idea of trying things out.
Yeah, on the one hand, we're very progressive transportation city, like, ooh, let's try this protected bike lane design that no one else has really done in the United States and see how it works and evaluate. It's like, great. And then let's not do anything else for 10 years. So we have our struggles too, but yeah, glad that we're going to be able to do fourth all in one fell swoop.
Not temporary to begin with. So the premise of this panel, or the inspiration of it, was 50 years ago was this plan that had a significant impact on what we see today. If we're thinking 50 years into the future, what are some things that you might like to see? I'm going to start with Andre.
Oh, great. Well, I would like to see a car-free downtown personally. I think it's a place that it could happen, certainly. And I will say the Street Trust does host a sort of World Car-Free Day celebration, and we let people sign up. We sort of piloted it this year. We saved about 600 miles of driving, so pretty exciting, and hoping to grow on that in the future. I would like to see affordable or free transit for people in the core as well. I think that could be really transformative in 50 years from now. Let's see, what else? I think I would like to see just a return to downtown. I feel like we're in a really, really interesting point in Portland history where like a lot of people are like afraid to be here. And I think that it is a beautiful geographic space. And I think we need to like come together and heal and celebrate our city. So I'm optimistic about the future 50 years from now. I hope to be here. So we'll see. Yeah.
Mark.
Well, I guess 50 years from now, I think, well, I'd be interested to see if downtown doesn't have a much higher percent so I'm gonna say downtown, I'm gonna mean the small, your map downtown. And I'm gonna think that might have a much higher percentage of residential population than it does now. So it might even up to the Pearl District. I work in the Pearl District, which feels more like it's half residents and half employees. In downtown right now, or at least the time we worked on the plan, was about 7 employees or 8 employees per 1 resident. So I think what could be interesting for the character of downtown 50 years from now could be a much more residential place. And I think that could enable more car-free streets and more car-free areas like this other diagram that you're showing there, which if it remains office use could be more challenging based on sort of the way we're still moving around despite the investments we've made since 72 downtown plan. But I think a very much more residential downtown could be pretty interesting. I guess 50 years from now, I'm also working for an architecture firm wondering how flexible these big office buildings and skyscrapers are, because I don't know that they're that flexible. they're pretty designed to be office buildings, and turning them into residential towers or hotels is not,
I've been reading about that. though.
it's
I think
possible, it's possible,
Yeah.
it's a big lift, but I'm be interested in seeing like the next generation of those on office skyscraper in American downtown, what that could be, that could be very interesting.
What about the parking garages?
Exactly. Do we need so many of them? I don't know.
They can't be retrofitted though. They're just the lost cause.
So, you know, someone trying to build them taller now with taller floor head, so they can be. If you locate the ramp just right, you actually can. But yes, Kathy, they may not need them. I guess that's my last thing would be the future of cars. You know, are we moving to a car share model? Are we moving to everything EVs? Does that change how much we like or dislike cars? I don't know. But are we going to a place where private car ownership is more like your phone? You just call a car on your phone when you need a car, and you don't, and it's that quick. It happens like an Uber, and that's fine. I think it's more this did a lot of generation that's not mine. They grew up with cars and wants their cars. But I'd be curious about that.
You didn't mention autonomous driverless cars.
Right.
But
Well, I guess
is that
the
what
phone,
you're
that's the
calling
phone
that
thing.
one?
I don't know.
Kathy,
I read an interesting statistic this morning while I was thinking about this panel. In 1963, 46% of 16-year-olds had driver's licenses, so about half. And in 2018, only 25%, only a quarter of 16-year-olds have driver's licenses. I mean, I think cars are on their way out. I think that, yeah, you're going to be able to call up a car when you need a car, but for the most part, 50 years from now, they're going to be, you know, done.
Yeah.
So done. I mean, we can't afford the space, we can't afford the maintenance, we can't afford the impact on our health, on our water, on our air, on our kids, on our CO2. I mean, there's absolutely no reason that we have cars downtown that are in regular use, private cars that are in regular use. It's just, they're dinosaurs. And, you know, I think the kids realize it, you know, that's why 25% of 16-year-olds are drivers now, you know, instead of 50%. We are changing our society, and we're not changing it to EVs, even though I think a lot of DOT money is going into, you know, where we're going to plug in the car. It really needs to go into how are we going to accommodate, how are we going to make our streets useful, you know, how are we going to turn the sewer of Burnside into a place that's a beautiful boulevard for people that are, you know, coming to visit Portland. You know, they go to Powell's, they go to Voodoo Donuts, and then, you know, they have to walk down this horrible street, you know. There are ways of reconfiguring our streets so that they're beautiful places. I think it's something that people who are traveling to Asia, to Europe, to South America are seeing, that we don't have to be reliant on cars screeching across every bridge and every, you know, every one of our streets. We're giving so much space to vehicles, and it's got to change financially. You know, PBOT has its $4 billion deficit. ODOT probably has a similar kind of deficit. We can't afford it in so many levels, and that's what's going to change. In 50 years from now, cars are going to be, you know, museum pieces, and we're going to be getting around by all sorts of other ways.
so Gabe, I mean, the current plan goes out to 2035. So if you were trying to start a new
Little bit
plan that looks
further.
out,
Yeah, I mean, I share the sort of the optimism for our central city. Like, I do feel like it's at a tough moment. I think, you know, some of the challenges we were facing are all around, like, just our city's become so unaffordable. And so, and I think, you know, I do think there's this potential for this, you know, really dynamic, pedestrian friendly downtown that's comfortable and easy to access by transit or bike. But I think we have to get a lot right in terms of bringing, like, making the next generation of Powell's and Voodoo Donuts. Like, how do we have places that people, how do we make that downtown feel part of people's neighborhood and give people reasons to be there? And what are the next sort of organizations and institutions and you know, iconic Portland things that will be here, so that people, you know, this is a place we want to spend time. You know.
so I want to start opening it up to questions from our in-person and virtual audience. And I will first or questions or comments? From any of you? Yes, and I will remember to repeat the question.
Yes, so I appreciate the discussion and look forward to hear maybe some comments about or reflections from the panel about what climate change will bring to Portland. I think Gabe pointed out the reflection point. Where will downtown go and what are we really planning for as we move forward, right? Is it for status quo or is it as we think about achieving the climate, what that means, and Portland becomes a valley, and as a population that looks more like California, that looks like Portland right now, what does that mean for downtown? What does that mean for our transportation?
All right, so the question, I'm not going to be able to articulate it exactly the same, but the larger question is, what's the role of climate change? So looking particularly at a 50-year horizon and beyond, what are we planning for? So how will the climate here be different, more likely drier, and how does that change how we plan for downtown?
I mean, I think some of what was hard to accomplish in the 72 plan around the car-free zones and open space is we need the density of residents to sort of make those places vibrant and make the adjacent land uses really work. So I think, we're talking about a potential future where there are a lot more people living here. I think that makes some of these ideas a lot feel more tangible and so that's the optimistic take, is that as we get it if we're able to get the density for the city concentrated as we planned for in our central city, that will make a lot of these older ideas that we've been talking about easier.
But where will we park?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big thing, is where, we have to put in trees. I mean, we have urban heat islands right now as it is. If you have 40% of the downtown is paved, a lot of that paving has to be removed. That is going to be something that you're going to be responding to with flooding. I mean, there's going to be some flooding, even if it is drier. I mean, there's, sea level rise now already with the Esplanade, right? I mean, that was raising that bridge up. There's going to be a lot more of that, of extreme weather events. So, more trees, ways of dealing with heat. I mean, maybe living in those parking garages makes some sense because you can, be sort of underground. I mean, seriously, 50 years from now, we're going to be a very different planet. And we have to be thinking about that. Where is it going to flood? Where is it going to be extremely hot? How can we have water? How can we, use resources so that we can eke them out for the rest of our lives?
I'm thinking particularly about this ancient flowing thing we have going right through our city, the Willamette River. And I feel like there really is a disconnect between downtown and that water space. And I think there's going to need to be significant efforts to connect people to that blue space in the coming years. I think that'll be, especially as we see temperatures rise. I mean, it was the hottest October in history, right? So
Swimming.
things, yeah, exactly. Like, just people have been going to that water for tens of thousands of years, right? And so we've really cut ourselves from it. So I think we need to definitely make a way back to connect to it and engage in its healing properties. It'll cool us off when the sun is hot, like, very seriously.
And it's a transportation corridor
Absolutely.
that we have not been using. Well, we did use until about the 1940s or 50s, and then we stopped using it as transportation.
Well, we were able to get, the city was a lot closer to it, I think, right? I mean, or at least the downtown, the central city, like an issue. I guess climate change, I would say a little bit, our biggest problem, like Gabe said, is density, frankly. So we talk a lot about density, we're trying to do density, but there's only a few pockets where we're actually really dense. Los Angeles is more than twice as dense as we are across a much larger geography without really talking about it until recently. So that density enables the pressure on parking and cars, like Gabe was saying, that could get the cars to go somewhere else because we have so many people walking around that it just does not make sense, and riding around, it does not make sense to drive or to park or just to go grocery store 3 blocks away. That's one thing. Second thing on transportation, those small blocks again, maybe our block isn't the 200 by 200 anymore, but it's 4 of those combined. And to Kathy's point, maybe you take out the streets in between and you get the green trees in there. We have a Barcelona, that's more of a Barcelona block size, 460 by 460. And again, that's really only starts to be enabled as a conversation topic if the office situation changes, which is the big question mark 50 years from now. Are we going to have the density of office? Is that critical for the region? A downtown office employment center in the central city, in the traditional downtown, is that a key part of our future 50 years from now? And is that something we need to preserve? Vancouver, BC, for example, had a moratorium on the removal of office space, zoned office space in their downtown because there was so much energy to build high density condominium towers. They were losing the space that was set up with the transit mall, with the transit bikes and the open space, like stuff, that they're losing opportunities to build office buildings. So if we think and we're comfortable that the hybrid thing is where we're going 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we may not need those buildings or that space, and we could think about other futures.
And architecturally, we're gonna have to pay attention to shadow and sun and heat islands and things
Totally.
like that we're not really doing a lot.
That's an argument today for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I see there is a hand up on the Zoom, so,
And another one.
oh, yes, so Sarah, unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm sorry to even ask this question, but only once, very slightly, and I think it was Andre who brought it up, that people have fear now of going downtown and crime rates are a little bit crazy. Well, the same is for all of the public transportation. Things have gotten a little bit bizarre. And people don't feel safe. And in particular, there's a driver shortage because of the safety issue. So I wonder how much thought goes into this when we're planning all of this, the infrastructure behind it to make people feel safe, whereas they feel a lot safer in their cars or using other methods of getting around. And not just, and there are a bunch of people who don't want to bike in the rain. We have some weather that's not conducive to cycling, because that can be one solution, certainly not for the elderly, maybe all the time. However, I'm wondering if someone can speak to that a little bit, because that would be personally a major deterrent for me. Thanks.
I'd love to chime in on
Yeah.
this. I did want to give a quick shout out to Opal and Portland Streetcar for implementing their rider ambassador program. So I think that's really, really tremendous as we think about new ways to care for people on our transit systems. And so my hope is that we put pressure on agencies that run transit in our region to think about what safety means and implement things that are proven to be successful. And so if you haven't seen that program, Sarah, I highly, highly recommend you check it out. I think it's made a huge difference.
Can you just briefly say how it works?
Yeah, so basically, the streetcar partnered with Opal and they have ambassadors that actually ride on the system. And they have, backpacks, access to resources. They help anyone on the system that needs support. And they're trained in de-escalation and all of that. And they're not like fare enforcers, I think. And so it's really cool, especially when you're on a type of transit where you don't have direct access to the operator. It's nice to have someone in that space with you that's a part of the organization. So I'm super excited. They were in a pilot this year, but my understanding is they're going to continue on. And I think it would be really cool to see that on TriMet as well.
So it's looking at transit almost as a community center and saying, here we are helping the community as you're on transit.
Exactly, a part of the public realm, right? Like I think transit is a part of public space. You enter it, and so making sure that everyone on that feels safe.
Any other thoughts on that question from any of the
On
panelists?
safety. I mean, I live downtown, like right in the heart of things. I bike downtown and I'm the oldest person on this panel too. So, I'm 65. And I do feel safe, but I understand people's hesitation about being on transit and being downtown. Because there is a lot of activity and also a lot of people who are unhoused, people who do not have the opportunity to have a place to live. I mean, I think a lot of the kind of fear comes from not knowing unhoused people are people too. People are afraid of interacting with somebody if they're living in a tent, and they're just poor. They're not scary people. But I think that, you know, the more that we can address neighbors as people, you know, the less fear that people will have. And so I think, you know, expanding those kinds of ambassador programs in lots of different realms, the non-carceral ways of dealing with people who are under stress downtown is going to change that kind of fear equation. Also, more activity, you know, like you said, you need higher density and more restaurants that are open past, this is my biggest frustration with Portland restaurants, they close at 8 in the evening, you know? And, you know, I mean, I think, you know, an all-night city is something that I would love to have in the future. That's another thing that's going to happen with climate change, is that we're going to have an all-night city because that's when it's cooler, you know, that's when the sun's not beating down on us. And I would I would thrive in an all-night city.
I think to build on what Kathy's saying, you know, the COVID, the pandemic, the main thing it did to start everything was the removal of all these employees, the thousands of employees in those buildings. The downtown kind of evacuated its streetscape, which sort of led to, I think, a lot of, you know, free space where people aren't there to indirectly surveil or be a part of that environment and engage people on a one-to-one on a daily basis. That was one thing that happened. So I think in terms of feeling safe, it's how can we replace that density, that loss of people on the street, all kinds of different people, to kind of engage each other and interact with each other on a daily basis is one. I guess the second thing on the rain, I don't know what to do about the weather. I mean, the weather's tough. Again, density would help there too. If your trip is short, you know, so you can get to the grocery store because it's only a few blocks away instead of being in Hollywood and I got to go here. I have to go out to, you know, Brentwood, Darlington to get us the other thing. If there was more people in a closer space, the market would respond and sort of provide those other things.
Walkable neighborhoods, walkable
yes, so you
corridors.
sort of, you would be able to have an easier route to achieve.
Well, this is what those Barcelona super blocks do, is they have
Good.
everything.
Yeah, and that's much higher, much higher densities.
Mhm.
So it's, you need to start with the density, the D word,
Mhm.
which is a difficult conversation, frankly. Having been a part of those conversations for a long time. That's not an easy conversation to have.
Though it was a big part of the 1972 plan, and in fact, it was in building density was in the circulation element of the plan, which, I mean, so that connection between density and transportation was key in
How
that.
much has the density increased from 72 to now?
Residential density's gone up. I mean, again, the
Uh-huh.
densities, so the downtown plan and the central city plan are very successful in increasing.
Yeah.
You don't have the number, right?
Like, I feel like they said there was 11,000 residents.
Well, it started out, but like,
I think it isn't that now.
now it's at like 40 or 50,000,
So-
I
so
think,
it's
residents
quadrupled.
downtown. It's like quite a bit more.
Okay.
And the expectation in 2035 was to double that residential
So
population.
80,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, and I have a slide somewhere that has this. And then, again, we were supposed to add, Central City was supposed to add another 50,000 jobs, or again, another 30%. Yeah, I mean, that was pre-pandemic, what are we doing with office? So much more people were supposed to.
More people.
Let's see, let's go here and then first to Gabriel and yeah.
I just want to mention a question about the plan that being not being from Portland, I think it's interesting because I've heard you, mostly I think I'm from here or Seattle, those places, but like I am a student to a PhD here, I live downtown. I haven't felt that not safe. I used to not see it, I work, and then now that you say it, you got me scared. I haven't noticed that. I walk around and do places, but of course I'm close to find this area. But I haven't felt that. But I think it's interesting because I'm from here. I've been only 1 month for them, so I'm still learning and seeing the town. But it's interesting with different perspective. And related to the plan, I just I work as a planner for Uncle and I work on transportation plans. And I know the plans are perfect, but we talked about a lot of things that they need income. Traffic zones or bicycle lanes and all stuff. I just wonder, what do you think the strategy here in Portland specifically? I know Portland is Spain, but I studied it in my master's, a case study, like the participation of the people participating at the power maybe. But my colleagues are working many plans that they don't get income. A lot. So the paper and the plan goes away, the politics change, the conditions going change, and nothing happens. invested, get consultants with the plan or the city and on the happens. I just wonder what strategies in that plan in the future, that's not planetary park, etc. How do you see the implementation process here? Because from what I've seen, to me, this is great transit. I'm from Puerto Rico, I have bad transit, and I love it here. I take climate, I take train, I haven't been able to ride a bike, but I'm gonna do it soon, and I walk everywhere, and I feel like I love transit, I feel like a little boy, I take transit everywhere, and to me, it's great transit, because of course, when I come from the bad transit, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how we, I know you wanna make it better, because you're not, they say, the IoT order, right? So to me, this is great transit compared to whatever I see back home. But I just wanted your thoughts on how the implementation process, because we do have some good things related to transit that, of course, they get better, car-free streets, yeah, hopefully in the future. I believe most of all want that, but just wondering your thoughts.
Okay, I'm gonna try to paraphrase. Great perspective from one of our new students who's been living now in downtown for about a month. Came from Puerto Rico where he was a planner there, and remarking on the contrast between the places, particularly great transit here versus where you were in Puerto Rico. The question is framed around implementation. So it appears that we've actually implemented a fair amount of the plan. And that's not always the case with plans. Often they sit on the shelf and they're not implemented. So what are some of the strategies to actually make sure plans get implemented? Why did this work? Or, thinking about future plans, how do you do implementation? How do you make sure they get implemented?
I did appreciate how the 72 plan had a whole little implementation chapter at the end.
Strategy.
Yeah, and I think that's key, is just as thinking through and I think it's like the plan in the first couple of years, it's like a plan is kind of tested, and are you able to make progress? Like, can you demonstrate that a plan has progress and teeth, and like the conversations that you had, like all the community energy and engagement that you had is resulting in something, and then the momentum can build on itself, or vice versa. If it all just like nothing happens for several years and it all peters out, then you sort of so I think that I guess it's having an implementation strategy, I think, and having follow through, and sort of connecting the dots between the folks who you were able to engage in the planning process, and showing showing some results. And they don't need to, you'll see a lot of our central city infrastructure. It would be great if we had big budgets to do more transit malls style investments. We don't right now. But we're still able to make, you're still able to make changes. Might not be exactly what everybody's wanting, but you're able to show that you
So
follow through.
I wonder, because Mark, you in the very beginning of our talk, you mentioned that some of the motivation for the early plan was air quality. So there's a federal Clean Air Act. This city was in non-attainment, so particularly some of the parking policies were connected to that air quality. So to what extent this question of implementation and success, partial at least success in implementation, comes from a regulatory structure? We also have the Oregon planning framework, and there, at times there's been federal. To what extent do you think that makes a difference?
Well, I guess just to answer that, and then this goes back to what Andre said earlier. I think you generate urgency, I think. So I think the answer to the downtown plan again was an urgent situation, and it was from multiple people in the downtown community who generated movement, action, and timing and luck. There's a bunch of things that get plans implemented and adequate funding. But you need to start with a lot of people agreeing that something needs to change. We need to do something. This isn't working. Downtown in the late 60s was like a lot of other American downtowns, and no one wanted to be there. So we need to reinvest. What are some big moves? Let's organize around some things we think we can do. Political leadership was in the right place. You had communities sort of saying the same thing. You had business owners probably saying we need to change. We need to do something. I want to go back to what Andre said earlier, is like a failure of all this is Andre and a whole bunch of the community saying this place still doesn't feel like it's for me, right now. So I think the urgency now is the climate change issue. Like we need to do all these things about walking, bike, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, a little bit to Kathy's point, like we're not doing enough there. Like that's not working. Whatever we're doing is not enough. There's still too many people driving. There's still too many, too many fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. But we're not doing enough urgency on the climate action plan to sort of solve this for future generations of Americans, Portlanders, whoever they are coming here. Is one column of urgency. The other is the social and the inclusion. Like, and not enough voices are being heard. We're not hearing from enough people. And we have accomplished a lot in these plans, but we don't think that's for enough members of our community. A whole bunch of the Portland community does not feel necessarily comfortable in the infrastructure that we're building, the places we're making, the buildings we're designing, right? So we need to figure out how to generate urgency in those two columns to get a new plan, or the Central City 2035 plan, which I think strive to sort of be a little transformative for the future generations. Like what are some things and some places and some ideas that can make downtown feel different for the next generations of the community? But I think that your question is hard. It's hard. Implementing these plans are hard. They are supposed to be 25-year plans. So, you do have some time. You don't need to do everything in the first 5 years. Like, Gabe's been working at Central City in Motion very successfully for the past few years, but that's a long-term plan that's sort of not going to happen overnight. But you do need to have enough of the community together sort of around a shared outcome. And you may be coming from different places, but you all need to sort of agree that we need to do something differently. If what we're doing now doesn't work, and there needs to be enough of a fire under there to kind of make it happen. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you're saying a lot of words like, the urgency, but we don't really have a sense. I don't think that there is a sense of urge. I don't feel the sense of urgency in Portland right now, other than that $4 billion backlog of projects that have to get done. I mean, that's what I hear from PBOT a lot. But I mean, I would love for a lot of the PBOT staff to be assigned to do things that are really transformative. I mean, I know the people in your staff, I know there's really great people, but there are not enough of them that really can move these plans forward. I think that's when I'm really going to feel like people understand the climate emergency, that they really understand the crisis and the fatalities that are happening on streets. Those things aren't going to change until enough staff are assigned to do them. And you asked about regulatory things. I don't think regulatory things change a whole lot unless there's like consent of the governed. And the consent of the governed, ideally should be people in East Portland who are like, engaged and, their voices listened to, but it really is a power thing. I mean, it's power dynamics. Who is pulling the strings? Whenever we're doing plans, we're always like making power maps, who is really making decisions. And it's the people who, own the government, and fund the government. And we don't talk about that nearly enough. We do in advocacy circles, but I don't think we do in panels like this enough.
I'll tell you, prior to the pandemic, the 2035 plan discussion was very hard to create a sense of urgency. Everything seemed to be humming along. Like Central City seemed to be going along, frankly, very well. I mean, I'm super glad to hear I think that's always a great perspective. We've all been looking at it so intensely for so long that you lose sight of like, well, yeah, you compare this to other places, maybe it's not so bad, yeah. But prior to the pandemic, when we were working on that Central City 2035 plan, trying to generate heat on like, there's something we do, it's like pretty hard. Oh, whoa. There's such a thing as you get so progressive, you become conservative, right? It's like, hey, whoa, like, what are you talking about? You talking about doing that again? Like, whoa, do we really need to do that? I'm not sure that we need to go that far. Like, why, because look out the window, like everyone's going shopping, everyone's hanging out, everyone's doing this, they're riding transit, they're riding their bikes. It looks like things are pretty good. It's hard when things are great. Right now, I think what the pandemic has produced is now a situation. I know, I agree, Kathy. I don't know if it's urgent enough, but like all of a sudden downtown's back in the paper again of like, something has to change. We have to do something, what is it? How do you not break it while you're trying to fix it?
I mean, another piece of the power dynamics I always feel is the car industrial complex. I mean, it's a $40 billion industry in the state of Oregon. A $40 billion industry. It's how much we pay to, insure cars, buy gas. I mean, that's a ton of money. And that money really talks very loud, and that really directs how we're still planning.
I think also the implementation, I mean, the role of organizations like Street Trust, I think to play a role in that.
Absolutely.
implementation
I
side.
think, yeah, the relationship with agencies and, you know, community-based organizations, I think there's an opportunity to really push on them. And one thing that I think is emerging is really building that accountability into the plans. I think planning has a history of not doing that and like being really afraid to fail. And the way I've approached my work, even in school and thinking about like, if I'm involved in a plan creation, it's like, write what your goals are very, very clearly and come up with a plan for if you don't, like, what do we do if we're not reaching our goals? What's our strategy? And like, when you adopt that, or you take that to city council and you adopt it, like somebody in the future can point back and say, hey, you adopted this, so we need to do something about it. You wrote it in, this is the rules, right? And so I think building that accountability in is something we need to get a lot braver about.
I know Cameron, you had your hand up earlier for a question.
Yeah, Andre's comment earlier about rebuilding connection to our river. Thoughts me, we're looking at central city here, a lot of the thoughts that are here have been, you know, that we're looking to reduce all the events. And I imagine that a large portion of that is successful in the city center. Means that we're going to see much smaller traffic volumes on our commuter streets. In particular, when we're talking about connection to the river, I'm thinking I-5 on the area side, but it's a huge part of the road downtown. It's a massive swath of very expensive land, likely not redeveloped for residential purposes, and that could be some of the most prosperous land in the city. We've got precedent for taking out a highway, specifically after large natural disasters in California. Is there opportunity there for Portland to remove that highway? You know, either before or after the going here gives us our decision.
All right, I'll paraphrase in particular, the crux of the question for those of you online is looking forward, is there an opportunity to think about doing something as bold as removing I-5 on the east side of the river, either before or after the earthquake? I hope I did the question enough justice. Thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll say I'm a proponent. I'd also want to quickly take a moment to honor my grandfather who's in the room with us and was in Portland prior to I-5 being built through his neighborhood. And so I think just a reflection on what sort of restorative justice could be done through a project like that.
Thoughts?
I would say one element of the downtown plan that we still have not figured out is how to meet the river in a very successful way on the west side. So before we figure out how to, I mean, well, let me restate that a little bit. I think, yes, we would never build a freeway on the riverbank. I mean, even in the way it was done before, let alone the riverbank through communities, just the destructive act of doing that would not happen again, period. So we would never. So we need to have a plan in place, and there has been conversations about what to do in the event of an earthquake. Because I think in that 50-year horizon we were talking about, I think the freeway, ODOT's going to have to do something with the freeway to fix it, maintain it, do something. I would just say we have not, as a city, I would say with the river frontage that goes right through the middle of the river, we have not figured out a very compelling way to get down. We have this green strip that's been there since the downtown plan, which is great for some events, some big stuff, but most of the time, like right now, it's a big sort of muddy lawn area that is pushed buildings further and further back away from the freeway. Does it on one side, sort of effectively it's a freeway, so stay away from it. On the other side, it's for apparently, I think, to step down the river, there were some decisions there that I think maybe made sense at the time, but they've effectively erased sort of an active, what could be a very vibrant and active relationship of the downtown edge to the Willamette River, its front yard, arguably. That we have not gotten right yet. So I would want us to sort of really think aggressively and proactively about how to meet the Willamette River in a compelling way on the side where we have actually that ability to do so now. Look at that, learn from that, and then go over to the east side and figure out what the right solution is over there.
I wanted to actually read something that I was going to, I thought we were like each doing like a little speechy thing, but we didn't do this, and I think it's really important, which is the first people to arrive in this area created communities and summer encampments along the rivers. Portland rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualapan, Kalapuya, Molala people, and many other tribes and bands whose names were not recorded by later settlers. The first people in this area maintained footpaths and traveled for thousands of years by foot and by water.
Thank you. Any additional comments before I go to more questions? Any additional questions? Yes.
I guess my question is related to previous one, but I want to know if you can provide any insight as to how is it that there seems to be some level of consensus, like for planning right now about where things are moving away from car and for focus on justice. But then at the same time, projects like the current like I-5 expansion, but most of Sweden
Okay, so the question is, there's sort of a juxtaposition of there perhaps consensus on that we need to be moving away from cars is a lot of what we've been discussing. But at the same time, we're having a big debate here about expanding I-5 through the Rose Quarter. So any reflections or thoughts on how these two things are happening at the same time? Is that?
I'll start. I mean, there's a couple of things. I think this is a specific space. I think the average Portlander still drives predominantly, right? And so I think that's something we have to take into consideration. And then from the more political side, there is a very specific body that guides a lot of transportation in the state of Oregon. That's the Oregon Transportation Commission. And that is an appointed, so it's all of the power, basically, lights off. And it's exactly. And that is an appointed body. And so I think that actually has a lot to do with the, allocation of our funds. They manage ODOT's budget. And so that's something that I would pay attention to as well, as who's sitting in those seats.
Back to the power question, right, Kathy?
Absolutely back to the power question. I mean, something that we've sort of been talking about in the kind of low levels of advocacy is, but I think that we should elevate is the Oregon Transportation Commission needs to be elected. It cannot be an appointed body because it's an oversight body that has control over what the direction that we need to go. And it can't just be car voices. And that's what it is right now. Car and freight voices.
I would say, Gabe, you were gonna say, no, you don't want to.
I'll let you go first.
He hasn't dropped it.
He's gonna wait for whatever I say. I would say, I think like the comment from Puerto Rico again, that this is an opportunity for Portland to look up a little bit and look at the entire I-5 on the west coast of the United States kind of corridor. This is a big facility, and think about, and I'll go to the freight angle of, so the cars have to go somewhere, so if we want to kick them off all the streets, it's great, let's do that. They need to go somewhere, at least to Andre's point, for the foreseeable future. Freeways may not be the worst place to put them, is one thing to think about. Second thing is, I think I'm interested in sort of the equity of who is using the freeway and for what, especially in the freight angle, like those jobs, those truck drivers, those men and women who are driving vehicles that are relying on time to, like, they leave and they need to get to where they're going in a certain amount of time. And those are, I think, generally decent job. I don't know a lot about that, but I would be interested in learning more about the businesses around the region that are not really in downtown, but we're looking at the I-5 interchange. I'm looking at it right now. But it's because it's right in front of us right now. They just widened I-205 not too long ago to do the same type of project for a longer area, and there was not so much sort of squawking about it, interestingly. So they were able to do that, and now they're here kind of right in front of the Willamette River, and everyone's is, for good reasons, I think we're looking at it. But it just happened again in East Portland, and there wasn't so much. Is that because more people are driving out there? Is that because more people don't care about it? Is it because the businesses are more support? I don't know. But I would be interested to know more about the economics of freeways for the businesses, the industries, the agricultural sort of community that uses those and relies on those facilities to move their goods and their staff around, and the value of sort of operating that effectively and efficiently, that system, for not only the freight, but I think for the cars that are gonna have to go somewhere in the next 50 years, because I don't think cars are gonna be totally gone in a 50-year horizon. So I think we should aspire to that, but I think they're gonna need to go somewhere. So I appreciate a more holistic look at sort of that system. I don't want to do ODOT's job for them, frankly, but they need to like think about that story a little bit more holistically.
Are you gonna say anything?
I mean, I think, sort of who are the facilities for and who are the stakeholders, right? And if we were just talking about the downtown or the central city and making it a place for all Portlanders and making it a regional center, it's, we're just more zoomed in than if we're talking about I-5, which is, got to zoom out a lot more, and ODOT certainly sees it that way. They're not thinking about their stakeholders, their interests are not in some of the goals in the 72 downtown plan, right? They're thinking about a much broader statewide perspective. So yeah, it's always a challenge, I think, when you're trying to thread those interests so that you can have make it work.
And I appreciate that Portland is, I think, one of only 4 US cities that has a freight plant too. And it's not something that a lot of cities do. But I think maybe that's about a good time to revisit the idea of I-5 as well.
Any additional questions in the room? I will bring up, there's a comment on here, not a question, but I'll turn it into a question, because it gets back to the river issue of what about a river taxi? So what about using the river?
The frog ferry.
Yeah, the comment specifically river taxi from Vancouver to Willamette Falls. Thoughts? Is that?
Comes back to
viable?
density. We need a lot more people a lot closer to the river, I think, to make that work effectively. It's a super neat idea. I think as a tourist thing, I think you can already do it. You can hop around a little bit, but we have, I mean, imagine a day like today, and your job is on your office. If you were coming to downtown to still work, you have that choice. You're 7 or 8 blocks away from the river and you're walking in the rain every day from a river taxi. That would be sort of tough. Unless you can get enough people again closer to the river. Our transportation also isn't, the river isn't set up well. They're tough to make
What if
work.
the river taxi had really great snacks?
Snacks,
Really?
good coffee might be helpful. There's a segment I think they figured out that you can make it work, which is I think from like Lake Oswego to downtown. Like you have to figure out if it's a true river taxi. You have to sort of be very strategic about where you think actually is the right. You can check enough of the boxes for density, for people who work in downtown, for other transportation options are already congested or not. You don't have any other options. Like for example, Macadam 43 is the only way really directly from that area. And I'm kind of just reliving. This has been studied a whole bunch. Frog Ferry came very close. I think it's been studied a lot and it hasn't quite worked every time because we're just not set up. If you look at Vancouver, BC, which has river taxis that work, I mean, look at the density on both sides and the amenities and the attractions that are right on the river and compare that to what we have. There's not much to compare there.
If you look at the pictures of Portland, just as it was being built up, though, it's just full of boats.
It's all, and it was all building. I mean, those pictures that Jennifer started with, we had, prior to that, there was building density on all blocks. There were very few vacant blocks. There's all kinds of density.
A lot of boats.
And they
too.
all started on the river. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And now
Now we
that's
only
what
get a-
changed.
That'd be
Rose
wonderful.
Festival.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to thank our panelists, and before we thank them, I'm going to turn it back over to Dean Adler to say a few
Well,
words.
I want to thank them too. There was a proposal to move I-5 off the riverfront in the 1980s. Earl Blumenauer was associated with it when he was an elected official here. So yes, thanks very much to the panel for a very, very illuminating discussion. This is obviously a critically important issue for the future, both of the university as well as the city, the region, and the state. Invite you to attend the next panel, which will be this coming Friday. 3:30 here, there, and
Everywhere.
it'll be about governmental reform. From whence came the commission form of government and how has it evolved over time? We have, as you probably know, the only multi-county directly elected local government, regional government in the United States, Metro. Obviously, Metro has a great deal to do with transportation related issues in this region, but it's a one-of-a-kind thing in the country. And we're talking about charter reform here and doing something innovative in that regard as well. So that's what the next panel will be about. So, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Thank you all.
Thank you.
My reference copy.